Have you ever watched someone you loved marry the wrong person while holding evidence that could stop the wedding, but knowing that showing it would destroy them? No? Um, then let me tell you about the day I stood in the back of street, Patrick's Cathedral, with a folder containing proof that my best friend's fiancé was already married to someone else, and I had exactly 12 minutes to decide whether to speak or stay silent. But to understand why that moment mattered, I need to take you back 3 years to the night I met Christian Dalton and realized some people are born liars and others spend their whole lives perfecting the craft. The story begins on a freezing January night in 2021 when my best friend Sophie dragged me to a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I didn't want to go. I'd spent the entire week managing a crisis at the advertising agency where I worked as a creative director, dealing with a client who kept changing their mind about a campaign we'd already filmed. I wanted nothing more than to stay home with wine and Netflix, but Sophie had recently gone through a brutal breakup and needed a wing woman. So there I was in a borrowed dress that cost more than my monthly rent, pretending to care about abstract art and champagne that tasted like expensive regret. Sophie worked in private equity, which meant she knew everyone in that room, and I knew absolutely no one. She introduced me to dozens of people whose names I immediately forgot, all of them wearing watches that probably cost more than my car. I was standing by a Rothko painting, wondering how long I needed to stay before I could politely escape when a man approached with 2 glasses of champagne. You look like you'd rather be anywhere else, he said, offering me one of the glasses. He was handsome in that casual, effortless way that usually meant either old money or exceptional genes, dark hair, green eyes, a smile that suggested he found the whole evening as absurd as I did. That obvious? I took the glass. Only to someone who feels the same way. I'm Christian Dalton. Emma Richardson. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing important, and I found myself actually enjoying the conversation. He was funny, self deprecating, interested in what I had to say. When Sophie found me again, she practically vibrated with excitement. Emma, oh my God, you're talking to Christian Dalton. Do you know who he is? Should I? Dalton Properties? His family owns like half of Manhattan? Christian laughed. My father owns properties. I mostly just attend boring events and try not to embarrass the family name. We all talked together for another hour, and by the end of the night, I could see something happening between Sophie and Christian that made my protective instincts kick in. They were looking at each other the way people do when they're already writing their love story in their heads, all potential and possibility, and none of the reality that comes later. I should have seen the red flags then. The way Christian's phone kept buzzing and he kept ignoring it. The moment when someone called his name across the room and he visibly tensed before putting on a smile and waving. The fact that when Sophie asked if he was on social media, he said he valued his privacy too much for that nonsense. But I didn't see them because I wasn't looking, because he seemed nice and Sophie seemed happy, and I was just glad to see her smiling again after her ex had shattered her heart. Christian asked for Sophie's number. She floated home that night, already planning their future, and I felt that mix of happiness for her and low key dread that comes from watching someone you love fall fast and hard. They started dating immediately. Christian was everything Sophie had ever wanted: attentive, generous, interesting, ambitious. He took her to restaurants I'd only read about in magazines. He sent flowers to her office for no reason. He remembered every little thing she told him and brought it up later in ways that made her feel seen. Within 3 months, she was in love. Within 6 months, she'd moved into his penthouse in Tribeca. Within 9 months, they were engaged. And through all of it, I kept noticing small things that didn't quite add up. Christian traveled constantly for work, sometimes leaving for weeks at a time, with vague explanations about property developments and investor meetings. He never wanted Sophie to come with him, always had reasons why it would be boring for her or the timing wasn't right. His family, the wealthy Daltons, who supposedly owned half of Manhattan, never seemed to be around. There were no family dinners, no meetings with his parents, just vague mentions of them being overseas or busy with their own lives. He didn't have social media, which in 2021 was unusual enough for someone in their early 30s, but he explained it as protecting his privacy from people who might target him for his family's money. He didn't like being photographed, got uncomfortable when Sophie posted pictures of them together, asked her to keep their relationship off Instagram as much as possible. He's just private, Sophie explained when I gently questioned it. Not everyone needs to broadcast their entire life online, Emma. She was right. Of course, plenty of people avoided social media. Plenty of wealthy people valued discretion. There was nothing specifically wrong with any of it, just a collection of small oddities that my instincts kept flagging even as my logical brain told me I was being paranoid and overprotective. Then came the engagement party in October 2021, held at a restaurant in Soho that Christian had rented out entirely. It was beautiful, exactly the kind of event Sophie had always dreamed of, with 200 guests and champagne flowing and everyone celebrating their love. I stood next to Sophie as her maid of honor, watching her glow with happiness, and I tried to ignore the knot in my stomach. During the toasts, Christian's phone rang. He glanced at it, his face doing something strange for just a moment, and then he excused himself. I watched a step outside, saw through the window how his body language changed completely. He was angry, gesturing sharply, his face tight with stress. When he came back 10 minutes later, he was all smiles again, but I'd seen the crack in the facade. Everything okay? Sophie asked him. Just work drama. Nothing important. He kissed her forehead and went to greet more guests. I made a decision that night that I've questioned 1,000 times since. I decided to look into Christian Dalton. It started innocently enough. I Googled his name and found surprisingly little. A few mentions in real estate publications, some charity event photos from years back, but nothing substantial. No social media presence at all, which was exactly what he'd said, but combined with everything else, it felt deliberate, like he was hiding. I knew a guy from college, Marcus, who'd become a private investigator after a career in journalism didn't work out. I called him on a Tuesday afternoon, sitting in my office with the door closed, feeling ridiculous and intrusive and unable to stop myself. I need you to look into someone, I told him, but this has to stay completely confidential. Who are we looking at? Christian Dalton. He's engaged to my best friend, and something feels off. Marcus was quiet for a moment. What kind of off? I don't know. That's the problem. Maybe nothing, maybe I'm just being paranoid, but I can't shake the feeling that he's hiding something. Give me what you know about him. I told Marcus everything, the family business, the penthouse address, the places Christian said he traveled for work, every detail I could remember. Marcus said he'd start digging and get back to me in a few weeks. Those weeks were torture. I went to wedding planning sessions with Sophie, helped her choose flowers and a venue and a dress that made her look like she'd stepped out of a fairy tale, all while wondering if I was about to destroy her happiness based on nothing but a gut feeling. Marcus called me on a cold morning in December. Emma, we need to meet. Not over the phone. My stomach dropped. You found something. Yeah, and you're not going to like it. We met at a coffee shop in Greenwich Village, somewhere neither Sophie nor Christian would ever randomly appear. Marcus slid a folder across the table, his expression grim. Christian Dalton exists, he said, but not the way he's presented himself. I opened the folder. Inside were photographs, documents, a whole second life I knew nothing about. His real name is Christian Dalton. That part's true. But Dalton Properties isn't his family business. His father, Robert Dalton, owned a small property management company in New Jersey that went bankrupt in 2015. Christian worked there until it collapsed, then moved to New York and started presenting himself as part of a wealthy real estate family. So he's just lying about his background. It gets worse. Marcus pulled out another document. The penthouse he lives in, he doesn't own it. He's house sitting for the actual owner, a businessman named David Chen, who's been living in Hong Kong for the past 3 years. Christian has been telling people it's his while, basically serving as a glorified caretaker. I stared at the papers, my hands starting to shake. What else? Marcus hesitated, and I knew whatever came next would be the real bomb. Christian Dalton is married, has been since 2018. Her name is Rebecca Dalton, formerly Rebecca Walsh. They live together in a house in Westchester County that her family owns. She has no idea about Sophie. The coffee shop tilted around me. I looked at the photograph Marcus had included, a pretty woman with dark hair, laughing at a restaurant with Christian, his arm around her. The photo W as dated 3 months earlier. Are you absolutely certain about this? I've got the marriage certificate, property records showing them both listed at the Westchester address, credit card statements showing Christian making purchases in both locations, and surveillance photos of him with Rebecca as recently as last week. Marcus pulled out more documents. Emma, this guy is living a completely double life. When he tells Sophie he's traveling for work, he's going home to his wife. I thought I might be sick. Does Rebecca know about Sophie? I don't think so. I did some preliminary background on her. She works as a teacher, posts about her husband on Facebook regularly, seems to believe they have a normal marriage. Christian's just very good at compartmentalizing his life. Why would someone do this? What's the point? Marcus shrugged. Could be a lot of reasons. Maybe he's genuinely involved with both women. Maybe he's running some kind of long con, though I haven't found evidence of him stealing from Sophie. Maybe he's just a narcissist who likes the thrill of maintaining separate lives. I've seen it before, more often than you think. I sat there holding this folder that contained the power to destroy my best friend's world, and I had absolutely no idea what to do with it. There's more, Marcus said quietly. Sophie needs to see this sooner rather than later because the wedding's in 3 months, right? February 14th, Valentine's Day. Christian's been putting deposits down for another wedding. Same date, different venue in Westchester. That's when I knew this wasn't confusion or a mistake or something that could be explained away. Christian Dalton was planning to marry two women on the same day in different locations, and he'd been methodically constructing this elaborate lie for almost a year. I paid Marcus, took the folder, and sat in that coffee shop for 2 hours trying to figure out how to tell Sophie that the man she loved, the man she'd planned her entire future around, didn't exist. I decided to talk to Christian first. I know that sounds stupid in retrospect, giving him a chance to spin more lies or disappear or do damage control. But I needed to look him in the eye and give him the opportunity to explain, even though I knew there was no explanation that would make this okay. I called him and asked to meet for coffee, said I wanted to talk about Sophie's wedding gift and needed his input. He agreed easily, probably thinking I was just being a dutiful maid of honor. We met at a Starbucks in Midtown on a Tuesday afternoon. He showed up in a suit, clearly coming from some meeting, looking exactly like the successful businessman he pretended to be. Emma, what's going on? He smiled, that easy smile. This seems very mysterious. I put the folder on the table between us. I know about Rebecca. I watched all the color drain from his face. For a moment, he didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the folder like it might explode. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. I opened it to the marriage certificate. Christian and Rebecca Dalton, married October 2018 inches, Westchester County. Should I continue? He looked around the Starbucks like he was calculating escape routes, then back at me. I watched him try on different expressions: confusion, offense, concern, before finally landing on something that looked almost like relief. Okay. He leaned back. Okay. You found out. That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say, Emma? That I'm sorry? That it's not what it looks like? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. It's exactly what it looks like. Why? I kept my voice low, aware of the other people around us. Why would you do this to Sophie, to Rebecca? What's wrong with you? Nothing's wrong with me. I'm just living my life the way I want to live it. The casual cruelty of that statement took my breath away. You're destroying people's lives. I'm not destroying anything. Sophie's happy, Rebecca's happy, everyone's getting what they want. The only problem is that you can't mind your own business. You're planning to marry both of them on the same day. I had to pick the same day. Sophie wanted Valentine's Day, and I couldn't tell her no without raising suspicions. I was going to figure it out. Figure it out how, Christian? How exactly were you planning to be in two places at once? He shrugged. I would have thought of something. I always do. I realized then that he genuinely didn't see anything wrong with what he was doing. He'd constructed this elaborate web of lies and compartmentalized so completely that he'd convinced himself it was sustainable, that he could just keep both lives going indefinitely without consequences. I'm telling Sophie, I said. Today. Right now. No, you're not. His voice changed, went cold. Because if you do, I'll tell her you've been an Ove with me since the night we met, that you've been trying to sabotage our relationship because you're jealous. I'll tell her you fabricated all of this because you can't stand to see her happy. She won't believe you. Won't she? Think about it, Emma. You've been skeptical of me from the beginning. You've questioned every little thing, made comments, expressed concerns. I've been documenting it all, saving texts, keeping track. Sophie already knows you have doubts about me. It won't be hard to convince her that those doubts cross over into obsession. I stared at this man I thought was just a harmless liar and realized he was something much more dangerous. He was smart, calculated, and completely without conscience. You won't get away with this. I already have. For almost a year. He stood up. Stay out of it, Emma, for Sophie's sake. Because if you tell her, I'll make sure she never believes another word you say, and you'll lose your best friend while I get to play the supportive partner who helps her through the betrayal of someone she trusted. He walked out, leaving me sitting there with the folder and the terrible knowledge that he was right. Sophie was so in love, so invested in the fairy tale that she might actually choose to believe Christian's lies over my truth. But I couldn't stay silent. I couldn't watch her marry this man knowing what I knew. I called Sophie and asked her to meet me that evening. I brought the folder, I brought the evidence, I brought every piece of documentation Marcus had gathered, and she didn't believe me. This is fake, she said, pushing the marriage certificate away. This is doctored. This is some kind of mistake. Sophie, there are photographs, there are credit card statements, there's a paper trail going back years. Christian told me you'd been acting strange around him. He said you seemed jealous, that you'd been making inappropriate comments. Her eyes filled with tears. I I didn't want to believe it, but Emma, this is crazy. You're accusing him of having an entire secret wife based on what? Some documents anyone could fake? I had a private investigator look into him. You hired a PI to investigate my fiancé? Do you hear yourself? Sophie stood up. We were in her apartment, the penthouse that wasn't even Christian's, and I could see I was losing her. Emma, I think you need help. Um, I think you're going through something and you're projecting it onto my relationship. Call Rebecca. The number's in the file. Call her right now and ask her if she's married to Christian Dalton. I'm not calling some random woman because you've constructed an elaborate conspiracy theory. Sophie's voice broke. I can't do this. I can't have you in my life if you're going to try to destroy the best thing that's ever happened to me. Sophie, please, just look at the evidence. Really look at it. I want you to leave. Sophie, leave Emma, and don't contact me again until you're ready to apologize. I left. I sat in my car outside her building and cried for an hour, then went home and tried to figure out what to do next. I could call Rebecca directly, tell her about Sophie, but that would destroy her life without saving Sophie's. I could go to the police, but Christian hadn't actually committed a crime. Bigamy required attempting to legally marry both women, and he'd clearly been smart enough to avoid that. I could show up at the wedding and object, but Sophie had already decided not to believe me. For 2 months, I tried everything I could think of. I sent Sophie emails with the evidence attached. She blocked me. I tried to reach her through mutual friends. She told him I was having a breakdown. I even tried to contact Christian's parents, but they refused to talk to me about their son's personal life. The wedding invitations went out. My name wasn't on one. 3 days before the wedding, I got a call from Marcus. Emma, you need to see this. He sounded urgent. Christian made a mistake. We met at the same coffee shop. Marcus showed me new photographs taken just days earlier. Christian at the Westchester venue with Rebecca, finalizing details for their wedding ceremony scheduled for 2 p.m. on Valentine's Day. Christian at Sophie's venue in Manhattan, confirming arrangements for their ceremony scheduled for 6 p.m. the same day. He's actually going through with both, Marcus said. He's got the timing planned so he can do the Westchester ceremony, make an excuse about having to handle a work emergency, drive to Manhattan, and marry Sophie 4 hours later. How is that even possible? Neither wedding is legally binding. He can't file for a marriage license without committing bigamy since he's already married to Rebecca. So technically, he's just having two ceremonial weddings with no legal standing. Marcus pulled out more documents. But here's the thing. Rebecca thinks their wedding is a renewal of vows ceremony since they got married at City Hall years ago. Sophie thinks she's getting legally married. He's lying to both of them about what the ceremony actually means. I looked at the photos of Christian smiling with both women, playing both parts perfectly, and something in me snapped. I'm going to the wedding. Emma, Sophie made it clear. I don't care. I'm going to St. Patrick's Cathedral on February 14th, and I'm going to stop this wedding even if it means she hates me forever. Because at least she won't be married to a monster. I spend the next 3 days preparing. I put together a presentation, not just documents, but a timeline, photographs, bank statements, everything organized in a way that would be impossible to dismiss as fake or fabricated. I contacted Rebecca through Facebook, told her there was something she needed to know about her husband, and asked her to meet me. She didn't respond. I tried calling the cathedral, warning them that the groom was already married, but without legal proof, they couldn't cancel a ceremony based on a stranger's claims. February 14th arrived gray and cold, with snow threatening but not yet falling. I dressed in a simple black dress, put the folder in my bag, and drove to St. Patrick's Cathedral. I wasn't invited, but I walked in anyway, slipping into a pew in the back. The cathedral was stunning, filled with white roses and candles, and 200 guests who had no idea what they were actually witnessing. Sophie appeared at the back of the cathedral in her fairy tale dress, looking so happy it physically hurt to see her. Christian waited at the altar in his tuxedo, playing his part perfectly. The ceremony began. I sat there with my folder, with all my evidence, trying to decide if I was brave enough to stand up and destroy everything, because that's what it would be, complete destruction. Sophie would hate me. Her family would hate me. Everyone in this cathedral would watch me ruin what appeared to be a beautiful wedding based on claims they had no reason to believe. But I would know I tried to save her. The priest reached the part of the ceremony I'd been dreading. If anyone here knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. It's mostly ceremonial, that line. Nobody actually expects anyone to object. I stood up. The entire cathedral turned to look at me. I saw Sophie's face go from confusion to recognition to absolute fury in the space of seconds. Emma, what are you doing? Sophie's voice echoed through the cathedral. I'm sorry, I said, my voice shaking, but I can't let this happen. Christian's face had gone completely white. He knew. He knew exactly what was coming. This man is already married, I continued, loud enough for everyone to hear. His wife's name is Rebecca Dalton, and they've been married since 2018. He's been living a double life for almost a year, lying to both women, planning to go through ceremonies with both of them on the same day. The cathedral erupted. People were talking, shouting, demanding explanations. Sophie stood frozen at the back of the aisle, her bouquet trembling in her hands. That's insane, Christian said, his voice calm despite the chaos. This woman has been stalking me for months, making up elaborate stories because of some obsessive fixation. I've tried to get her help, but then explain this. I pulled out my phone and projected images onto my tablet, then held it up. The marriage certificate, photos of Christian with Rebecca, bank statements showing transactions in both locations. Explain why you have a wife in Westchester County. Explain why there's another ceremony scheduled there today at 2 p.m. with Rebecca Dalton, who thinks she's renewing her vows with her husband. Sophie moved, then, walking down the aisle toward Christian, her face a mask I couldn't read. Is this true? She asked him. Baby, of course not. She's delusional. We can call the police. Is it true? Sophie's voice cracked. Are you married to someone else? Christian looked at her, then at me, then at the 200 guests watching this unfold. I saw him calculating, trying to figure out if he could still talk his way out of this. That's when the cathedral doors opened. A woman walked in, dark haired and pretty, wearing jeans and a coat, looking confused and terrified. Rebecca Dalton had gotten my Facebook message after all. Christian, she said, what's going on? I got a message saying you were here, that there was some kind of emergency. Why are you wearing a tux? Why? She stopped seeing Sophie in her wedding dress. What is this? The silence in that cathedral was absolute. Sophie looked at Rebecca. Rebecca looked at Sophie. Both of them looked at Christian. And Christian Dalton, for the first time since I'd met him, had absolutely nothing to say. What happened next was chaos. Sophie dropped her bouquet and ran, her bridesmaids chasing after her. Rebecca started screaming at Christian, demanding answers. Guests pulled out their phones, recording everything. The priest tried to restore order and failed completely. I slipped out during the confusion, knowing my presence would only make things worse. I drove to my apartment and waited, unsure if I'd done the right thing or just destroyed my best friend's life in the most public, humiliating way possible. Sophie called me 3 hours later. He's married, she said. Her voice was hollow. He's actually married to Rebecca. They live together in Westchester. She had no idea about me either. Sophie, I'm so sorry. Don't. She took a shaky breath. Don't apologize. You tried to tell me. You tried to warn me, and I wouldn't listen. I chose to believe him over you. You loved him. That's not a crime. I was so horrible to you. You were protecting your heart. We were both quiet for a moment. Rebecca and I talked, Sophie finally said. After everything fell apart, she's filing for divorce. She's devastated. We both are. What about Christian? Gone. He left before the police could get there. Rebecca's pressing charges for fraud. Apparently, he'd been using her credit cards to pay for things with me, telling her they were business expenses. Sophie laughed, but it was bitter. He was scamming both of us, using both of us. I'm so sorry. Stop apologizing. Her voice broke. You saved me, Emma. If you hadn't stood up in that church, I'd be married to him right now. Or I'd think I was married to him. Whatever he was planning. Sophie, I need time, she said. I need to process this and figure out how to put my life back together. But Emma, thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth even when I wouldn't listen. She hung up. It took 6 months before Sophie and I were really okay again. 6 months of therapy for her, of processing the betrayal and the public humiliation and the realization that she'd been completely fooled by someone she loved. 6 months of rebuilding trust between us, of her apologizing for not believing me and me apologizing for the way everything had exploded. Christian Dalton was arrested 3 months after the wedding that never happened. Fraud, identity theft, credit card fraud. He pleaded guilty and got 4 years in prison. Rebecca divorced him. Sophie moved out of the penthouse that was never his and into a new apartment in Brooklyn. We're having coffee now, Sophie and Rebecca and me once a month, an odd little support group of women who survived the same liar. Rebecca's seeing someone new, a teacher at her school who she's taking very, very slowly. Sophie's focusing on work and therapy and learning to trust her own judgment again. And me, I've learned that sometimes doing the right thing means accepting that people will hate you for it, at least temporarily. That sometimes saving someone means destroying the beautiful lie they've built their life around. That friendship means being willing to be the villain in someone's story if it keeps them safe from the real monster. I stood up in that cathedral because I loved my best friend more than I feared her hating me. And I'd do it again, even knowing how much it hurt her, because some truths are too important to stay silent about, no matter the cost.